Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. I'm going super impromptu today. This was not expected, so this is going to have to be taken in the spirit that it's offered. But it's very important that we discuss this. What a present from Uncle Harry for Princess Charlotte. 10 years old she is today. Very many happy returns. But in strolls little Todge, on the same day that a visit to Canada is announced by their majesties, by the way, in Todge's Harry, yet again, who has lost his appeal for his special security arrangements that he craves so very much. Dismissed. 3 judges rejected the appeal. And we see a brazen display from Harry on the BBC. In this exclusive interview for BBC News, he goes running to the cameras, this publicity Shylock. This is a no-frills broadcast, my dear, a no-frills broadcast. We need to get to the nitty-gritty and just sit down and chat about it to get it out of our system. Do you understand? Putting the poor, stricken king's name in his mouth. And the funny thing is, I shouldn't confess this really, should I? But I will confess there are certain facets of this disagreement between Harry and Rafek and the royal household that put me in mind that Harry has some very good points here and there, in some ways. But the fact is, my dear, in the wake of all this nonsense, and post-2020 in particular, he has disparaged the family in the kingdom so very much that, as far as I'm concerned, even if there are little grains of sense in what he says, little grains here and there, suck salt. Suck salt, Harry. Because, as I've often said, my sympathy for those and my compassion for those who are undergoing their own troubles ends when you make everybody else's life a misery all around you. And this guy is hell-bent on revenge. Still. There is another memoir coming. You know it, I know it, and now Harry is absolutely sure about it. He's hell-bent. He says that it's impossible for him and his family to return to the United Kingdom. Well, it's party time for us then, isn't it, my dears? Sorry, America. You might have them for a while longer by the looks of it. But as I told you several months ago, Harry misses home desperately. He hates it over there. Hates it. He loves being around his young family. He made a few pals. He's English. He's got an English sense of humour to a point. I mean, not the best humour in the world, but of course he's got English sensibilities, English sense of humour. And as he said, he loves his home. It's all coming out now, admitting it all. He says that he's gutted about the decision. We thought it was going to go our way, he says. What? Why don't you say your way, Harry? When you say it didn't go our way, do you mean your way, you and your wife's way, or you and your legal team's way, or the royal we? Where does we come into it? And our? It's your way, or the highway, isn't it, Harry? He says that it is now proven that there is no way to win this through the courts, and that he wishes someone had told me about that beforehand. And this is a theme he returns to throughout the interview. His rage that no one told him that Rafek weren't subjected to the same legal requirements as other organisations. Well, firstly, you could have worked that out for yourself. And secondly, what about your fancy legal team who are so sharp and so quick-witted and onto it? Does it cross your mind that they might also be rinsing you, Harry? Rinsing you and dragging you up and down and through the courts on parade? For their own benefits rather than being so morally superior to everybody else because we're on Harry's team and Harry is the noble rightful king of this land. Why would your legal team explain to you the blisteringly obvious, Harry, when they can lure you in with the filthy lucre? The subject turns to Archie and Lilibet, as it does a few times. Or Archie and Lilibet, as the American, presumably, interviewer says. Harry tells us that he only returns here to the kingdom to go to funerals and to charity functions. But I put myself at risk for that, he says. Yes, I put myself at risk of this grave danger. You put yourself at risk, Harry, when you furnished your own memoir with a head count of all the Taliban fighters that you ended. You did it, Harry. You did it. You were coaxed or goaded into that stupid, vulgar and infra-dig confession. He says he will always continue with a life of public service and he will always support charities. But why, Harry? Why? Why does it have to be a public life? You loathed the glare of publicity, so you told us. It's not being forced upon you or thrust upon you just because you're a born prince. And you're telling us that you thought there might be less intrusion into your life by releasing a memoir, by releasing Netflix shows, and by moving down the road from Hollywood. Hollywood! The backwaters of Backgrid County. Oh, Harry boy. Cry me a river. Cry me a river. The thing my children are going to miss is everything. I love my country, he says. Well, I love it too, Harry. I love my country and my kingdom, which is why I have made a robust defence of it for the past few years. Thanks to you and your besmirching of it, you dragged it through the mud, and its international reputation suffered somewhat throughout the Commonwealth. But you love your country. Well, that's a funny, twisted kind of love, isn't it, my dear? That's funny, twisted kind of love. I miss the UK. I miss parts of the UK. Of course I do. And it's quite sad that I won't be able to show my children my homeland. My kingdom is what he really means. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. He complains about Ravek, and he complains that the risk management assessments and his level of risk has not been re-evaluated since 2020, when it was at the highest possible level because he's such a VIP in a very important high-risk categorization. And apparently others who are in that group get evaluated annually. Well, that's because, darling, you ain't been a working royal, have you, since 5 years? 5 years ago. So why would you get an annual review? You have not been a working royal, Haribobo. I wouldn't have taken it this far if I didn't have compelling evidence of facts. So you tell us, Harry, that your compelling evidence didn't convince the 3 judges, did it? Sorry. And on the subject of Ravek, he says that he was asked, did you know that the royal household sat on Ravek? And my jaw hit the floor. This was all a huge shock to him, of course, and the King's private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, who sits on Ravek, is mentioned, who he has previously disparaged in his memoir, yes. How embarrassing for the King to have everyone that he knows and loves, even from Camilla all the way down to his staff and his private secretaries, to be disparaged. But he says that he never asked the King to intervene. He says that he is now forced to go through the royal household for any visit he makes and accept that they are putting my best interests forward during these conversations and deliberations. So, no, I haven't asked my father to intervene. Not too sure I believe you, Harry, if you say so. The interviewer says that a major part of the justification for the decision that's been made is that you're no longer a working royal, Harry. And she says there's been a change in your status. Now, this was very interesting because immediately, well, he said, I'm going to cock it here and cock it there and cock everywhere, my dear, all over this land. My status hasn't changed, he says. No, you've got it wrong. My status has not changed. It can't change. I am who I am. And what I am needs no excuses. Give him a feather bower and a bird cage. I am who I am. I am part of what I'm part of, and I can never escape that. More's the pity. My circumcision will always be the same. Excuse me, not wearing the spectacles. My circumstances, as he says, will always be the same. So this is how Harry views himself, as far as he's concerned. I mean, he is right to say that he was born a prince and will die a prince. He is the son of a king. And he remains His Royal Highness behind the scenes. But I think it's a stretch to imagine that his status has not changed when he steps down from royal working life. This isn't Edward VIII abdicating. Harry was never going to be a king, bar some awful tragic accident. He was there, as he admits, as a spare, as an Andrew, or even an Anne, or any second, third, fourth, fifth son. And there's great honour and dignity in that. There's nothing to disparage about it. You can have a lot more fun, actually, sometimes. Charlotte, I'm sure, will go on to have a beautiful life because she has beautiful relationships with her family, not poisoned by bitterness and jealousy. So she's 10 years old today. At 20 and 30 years old, I'm sure you will see stalwart support. She could have made a fine queen, but she'll know and understand her place and will support her brother George. You watch it. You watch it happen. But you need to get to grips with the fact that your status does not remain the same, Harry. It has diminished. It has diminished because it was never actually that fabulous. Yes, you were very popular. People, for some reason, liked you. I never really did, but for some reason people liked you. Actually, getting together with the missus to begin with actually behooved your image and your reputation for a little while until we started seeing true colours shining through. But you were never the main course. You weren't even pudding. You were a little bit of starter, a little bit of, an aperitif, my dear. Let's not get excited and exercised about it. He makes a comparison by saying that the UK would be shocked to know that there are other people in the public eye who leave public office and they receive lifetime protection. Oh, people would be shocked. People would be shocked. Well, I wasn't shocked, because he then went on to explain that they might be in term for 4 years or 5 years. It seems that he's pointing to prime ministers. I mean, we all know that prime ministers receive lifelong protection. I think even Liz Truss, after her stint of 2 days or whatever it was as prime minister, I think even she gets a lifetime protection. And other important figures perhaps, but this is de rigueur. So no, we wouldn't really be shocked. He mentions the Al-Qaeda threat. He does mention that threat, but he doesn't mention the fact that he was responsible for it. And his words in spare. And he says that his concerns were disregarded and thrown away and ignored. I love it. Now, this is the bit that really annoyed me, because he said, because for me, security was made conditional in having that official role. That role that everybody knows myself and my wife wish to carry on. You cannot carry it on, Harry. This has always been the thing. He likes to keep telling everybody, as he does throughout this interview, that Charles and William were trying to make it impossible for him to leave because it would mean that he would have no security, so they wanted to imprison him and trap him back there. I'm sure they were freed by your absence, my dear. Freed by it. Because you've been troublesome and bothersome for years and years and years. And all the wonderful, fabulous elements that you brought to proceedings, and the good things, and the good energy, and all the good juju, always came with a side, didn't it, Harry? Always came with a side where you didn't know your place, couldn't shut up, todgered around, territorial pissings, I'm the alpha, you shouldn't be the king, I should be the king. So, it was like saying goodbye to a headache, wasn't it? To a migraine. But you cannot carry on the way that you wanted to carry on. You are not in the same position that you were in, and your status has changed, Harry. So that annoys me when he comes out with all of this. You cannot be half in and half out, as the late Queen Elizabeth intimated. Get it? Got it? Good. And then it's time to watch him squirrel and waffle as he is asked a pointed question. What do you say, Harry? He's asked. Why should the UK taxpayer pay for your security when you have your own private security? Very good question, isn't it? The only security he really needs would be Punjab from Annie. You remember that one? Now that would be rather amusing, wouldn't it, my dear? That would be rather amusing. Exactly, he's got all these millions and squillions for all of this private security. The way he prattles on, you'd think he was Salman Rushdie or something. Harry says private can only do so much. There's no jurisdiction in a foreign country. And police protection is effective protection, which is what my grandmother made very clear. And this is what he always does. Me and Granny were besties. I was her favourite, She wanted me for king. We were very close. We had a special connection. Yeah, a special connection. Willie doesn't have that connection with her. No, it was me. She just sat there in silence in the Sandringham summit because she couldn't believe how rude they were all being to me and how terrible. She just sat there as if she wasn't the queen and as if her word wasn't final. Harry, we see through it. He makes some points. He says that he provided 35 years' service to this country. That's stretching it out a bit, but he certainly did provide service to this country when he wasn't drunk. There were 2 tours of Afghanistan, he tells us, and unlike many of you, I believe that he provided decent service during those tours, and I believe that because I've heard from the lieutenants and the colonels and fellow soldiers that worked alongside him. I've also heard from those that disparage him, so there is nuance, but there is certainly much praise for some of his skills. I give him that credit. He says there were threats and risks that he was born into, which is true, but he enhanced them. And he says that they increased by the frenzy that came along with the press after his marriage. Well, most of that frenzy was magnified by your own behaviour, by being on tenterhooks, reverse tenterhooks, whereby you were just frothing at the mouth and champing at the bit to actually release your first rebuttal of how you were going to protect your wife from the press. You couldn't wait, could you, when you were engaged, to hurry out that first statement accusing everyone of, casual racism, this, that, and the 10th, and I won't stand for my future wife, so, you better just beware, Couldn't wait to play the brave dragon slayer, as Meghan tells us. My dragon slayer, saving princesses. If he is invited by the family to the kingdom, he tells us, then he gets security. But for any other reason, then he only gets what he calls a low amount or insufficient security, which he says is more or less just someone on the end of a phone. I love it. I absolutely love it. As I say, I do actually think that with his long years here before he left, I do actually think, without really giving it much deep thought, that he is entitled to something. Not the great and grand armoured vehicles and entire Met Police force and everything else that he's demanding, and, James Bond levels of intelligence, but, something. But am I going to feel sorry for him after the disparagements? No. And he says that he's treated differently to all the other examples that exist. The interviewer asks him, who specifically do you think is trying to punish you? Because Harry's spoken about punishment that he feels he's been receiving. Who's trying to punish you for leaving the monarchy? And Harry says, I don't think that anymore, now that I know security was being used as leverage. And he says that he's worried about today's ruling setting a new precedent that security can be used to control members of the family, effectively imprisoning them from choosing a different life. He says, I can never leave the royal family. That is my family, my larger family. I left the institution. Sophistry. And actually, Harry, even if you haven't left the royal family, they've left you. And I take no joy in saying that. But I've been telling you for a very long time now what Harry's just told you today, that his father doesn't want to speak to him, that William is incandescent. Do you see? All comes to light, doesn't it? He's telling you himself what he might have just called gossip and tittle-tattle a few months ago. He's telling you what I've told you in spades for many years. They've left you, but in Charles's case, that is out of loving detachment, because as much as he would like to reconcile, as you put it, and as much as he would like to iron things over, you made that pretty fucking difficult. Didn't you, Haz? You made it pretty fucking difficult. And so it's loving detachment from Charles. But with William, I would say that it is loathing detachment. Loathing detachment. You disparage his wife, his father, both stricken, continue to, in books and marching and shows, and you expect him to roll out the welcome mat like some sort of pussy? I don't think so. She says, your father is ill with cancer. Will you continue to visit him alone without the family? And asks about the ability of the children to visit him. And Harry says, but I'm acutely aware of the fragility of life. I can only come to the United Kingdom if I'm invited. Oh, what, so you can't pay for it yourself? Out of your millions and squillions. And there is a lot of control and ability in my father's hands. Ultimately, this whole thing could be resolved through him. Not necessarily by intervening, but by stepping aside, allowing the experts to do what is necessary. That said, this all was initiated under a previous government. There is now a new government. And he insinuates or implies that the previous Conservative government was part of an establishment stitch-up. He says, people have described this to me, once the facts were known, as an old-fashioned establishment stitch-up. And that's what it feels like. So just when he makes a few valid points here, there, and the third, then he comes up with his conspiracy theories. Do you understand? And all of a sudden he's being told by certain people that it's a stitch-up. And he pulls all the Diana faces. There's flashes of Diana all over this interview, I've got to tell you. The shadow side, you know, we all adore Diana, but then there was the panoramic shadow side, the paranoid side. This is what I was getting round to. It's the when he's talking about establishment stitch-ups, this is when you're hearing the paranoia rather than the logic and the reason. He's quite articulate and he's quite eloquent in his way. It's just a shame that he's talking complete and utter bollocks half the time, isn't it? Because it would be quite compelling if it weren't. It's ginger bollocks. Ravek, as I said earlier, he discovered were not constrained by the law, and he wishes that someone had told him that. And I've got to say it, you know, I've said it before and I will say it again. Why didn't your lawyer tell you that? Think about it, Harry. As you are paying your own costs and the costs for the other side, think on't, boy, get it, got it, good. If they're not constrained by law, then this decision was made by the royal prerogative, which means that this national security matter is not bound by any law, and that Ravek can abandon the very processes, the very expert processes that exist to protect individuals and the people around them from liability if anything should happen. So yes, I would ask the Prime Minister to step in and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and ask them to review Ravek and its members. If it is an expert body, what is the royal household's role there? So this is where we see the absolute rage and fury and the spittle coming from Prince Harry, and he is out for revenge. More revenge. It was visceral. It was visceral. And it was very clear to me that it doesn't matter his father's condition. It doesn't matter the fragility of the life. What matters is that he now wants to bring this to the Prime Minister's attention and get them to overturn the royal household's slight affiliation with Ravek and the influence that it has. They are just a part of the party, do you understand? But he wants that all trounced, and he wants to interfere in the mechanisms of his father's business. And he wants to be a thorn in his father's side and in William's side, so that every decision in the future will have reverberating consequences for them. But he says that he doesn't want battles. No, this boy, he just wants world peace. At the heart of it is a family dispute, he says. It makes me really sad that we're sitting here today, 5 years later, when a decision was made, most likely, in fact, I know, to keep us under the roof. And once they realise that myself, my wife, our kids are happier outside of the institution, then please, just look at the risks, facts, the impact if anything was to happen to me, my wife, my father's grandchildren, he says. Look where the responsibility lies. There's a duty of care that has been thrown out the window, and that doesn't feel great. And it's hard not to sympathise in some ways with that plight from the picture that he paints. But we all know that he paints with broad brushstrokes and with very myopic perspective, doesn't he, my dears? And that is why they are always pulled up on their recollections, their accounts, that vary from the truth. And I'm quite sure that Prince William and King Charles would be able to shed so much more light on all of Harry's accusations and suggestions and disparagements if they were vulgar. If they were vulgar, and if they decided to hang out all the dirty linen for all the world to see, then they would, and they'd do it. But they don't complain, and they don't explain, because they channel the royal spirit, and because they're gentlemen, and because you quite simply don't go into public battle against family. Do you understand? Unless you're Prince Harry, or his wife. And then, you do it every day. It's what you do for breakfast. Do you feel let down by your country? She implores him. At this point, yes. Yes, I do. But he says it's just a minority. The press are the ones who incite hatred. And it's hard. And this is the bit, isn't it? It's hard to forgive. It's hard to forgive. Who's asking for forgiveness? Lover boy. There are things that have happened that I can now forgive. Yes, I can. I have moved past that. I can forgive my family's involvement, unbelievable, my father's, my brother, and my stepmother. I can forgive the press. How magnanimous. Can someone call the conclave, please? We know that there's a vacancy, now that the late Francis has transfigurated to another kingdom, another realm. Transmogrified. There's a vacancy in the conclave for the new pope. Maybe I can't be king for a little while longer, so I can just fill in as pope, because I'm so magnanimous. I'm so very spiritually generous. And I can forgive. I can forgive them all. Ma and Pa and stepma and bra and sissy and la. The whole shebang. She bangs. Like Ricky Martin. He can forgive the press, he says. Wow, that's a biggie, isn't it? And that's when you know that you can't believe a word he's saying. Forgive the press, I ask you. What I'm struggling to forgive is a decision that was made in 2020 that affects me every single day, and it puts my family in harm's way. Everybody knew that they were putting us at risk in 2020 and thought that me knowing that would force us to come back. Do you not just want to ensure our security? He implores, and he speaks emotionally, that the one thing I could rely on was my family keeping me safe, and not only did they decide to remove my security in the UK, but they also signalled to every single government around the world not to protect us. Thought you were in a forgiving mood, Harry. Make up your mind. She says, is there any way that this can be resolved? I'm devastated, he says, about the people behind this decision. The feeling that this is okay. Is this a win for them? I'd hope not. There have been so many disagreements between me and some of my family. This issue is the sticking point. Of course, some members of my family will never forgive me for writing a book, he says, and he says it proudly. Of course, they will never forgive me for lots of things, he says. See? Do you see how I told you how incandescent things are behind the scenes, especially with William? I would love reconciliation with my family. Oh, bring out Sister Sledge. We are family. I think it's too late for that, my dear. Sister Sledge, Brother Todge. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. Oh, what, because you've decided that the gloves are off? Although, actually, they're still on, because that's what you're doing on this very day. You're still fighting them, and you're going to be fighting and trying to bring them all down. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. Life is precious. I don't know how much longer my father has. Choking back tears. He won't speak to me because of this security stuff. But it would be nice to reconcile. Make up your mind. Make up your mind. They've moved on, Lovey. You made it quite clear how you felt about them. You made it quite clear how you didn't give a toss about their feelings for parading their private lives all over the world, and profiting from it. You didn't care at all. Even while the late Queen lives, and the old Duke was still living and breathing and dying. Didn't care a stitch. If they don't want that, that's entirely up to them. Yes, it is, isn't it, Harry? Yes, it is. And I looked at the comment section under this interview for the BBC, and they were brutal. Brutal. But the truth is, my dear, however much some of us with a heart might feel a bit for the boy, and be able to see some of his arguments from some perspectives, because we have compassion, and because we understand nuance, we can also see the spoilt brat that he has behaved as and continues to behave as. And we can also see how immature it is to have done all of this in public over the last 5 years and made such a show and a tawdry cabaret out of something that could have been kept private. There aren't many families, whether it's here in the kingdom or all around the world, that don't have their feuds, that don't have their bitter, petty disagreements and resentments and jealousies and sibling rivalries and all the rest of the claptrap, darling. That's being human, isn't it? Not many people escape that. But then to parade it out and trot it out for profit and for commercialising, to make a point. Vulgar. Vulgar and in for dig. And so today we see one of the consequences. Dismissed. Thrown out. Thrown out. Cry me a river. Cry me a river. Thank you for joining me, my dears. I appreciate your company. And we'll have a proper broadcast in proper surroundings next time. Just thought I'd pop in. Impromptu. For a bit of silly fun. See you next time. And toodle pip.